Good day everyone! Our lesson is lesson 13. Our topic is about assessment in learning English. Our objectives in this lesson, you will be able to define assessment of learning, apply assessment strategies in the conduct of instruction, and understand the general use of assessment in teaching English. Let's talk about what is assessment. There is a question, what is assessment and what is the reason why assessment is administered or conducted? According to the book, assessment is conducted to determine whether the learners know, understand, and are able to perform knowledge and competences required of them. Okay, we all know that assessing student knowledge and understanding is not a new thing because assessment in learning plays an important role in the process of learning and motivation. It is important to consider how to best measure the learning that you want your students to achieve. Okay, this tells us what the students learned, how well they learned it, and where they struggled. In addition, assessment is not only way we can measure student performance, but it is also a way for teachers to plan instruction and reflect on their own methods of teaching. So there are three lenses that assessment could be viewed. The first one is assessment for learning. Next is assessment as learning, and the third one is assessment of learning. The first lens in assessment is assessment for learning. When we say assessment for learning, this is a type of assessment that determines the learner's background knowledge and skills and tracks their progress in understanding. Assessment for learning is also referred to as diagnostic assessment or before the assessment is implemented. Okay, what is diagnostic assessment? Diagnostic assessment can help you identify your students' current knowledge of a subject, their skill sets and capabilities, and to clarify misconceptions before teaching takes place. We as teachers, we assess our learners by determining the learning that they already learn or know. In this case, it helps us to identify the topic that will fit for them. Like for example, you are going to discuss your newly topic to your students. First, you need to give some warm-up activities like pre-test or pre-assessment. By establishing or by giving that strategy, your learners can better track and measure their growth in each of the knowledge standards. Okay, the second lens in assessment is assessment as learning. This type of assessment is a more learner-centered approach. This lets the learner reflect on the results of his or her progress and plans the next step to improve performance. Assessment as learning is referred to as formative assessment or during the assessment is implemented. It is a process by which assessment information is used by teachers to adjust their teaching strategies and by students to adjust their learning strategies. This type of assessment encourages the students to take an active role during the teaching learning process. During our discussion, we can ask our students to raise their hands if they feel they have understood a newly or introduced content or topic. In that way, we can monitor the student learning to provide ongoing feedback that can be used by instructors to improve their teaching and by students to improve their learning. In addition, assessment as learning assess a student's comprehension and understanding of a skill or lesson during the teaching learning process. The third lens in assessment is assessment of learning. Assessment of learning. This is the more traditional view of learning as it measures the learner's attainment of the learning objectives or goals of the lesson or of the standards. Assessment of learning, sometimes referred to as summative assessment or after the assessment was implemented. Assessment of learning are typically administered at the end of a unit or grading period and evaluate a student's understanding by his or her achievements. They sum up what the class can now do or now knows as a result of teacher's instruction. Example of summative assessment in the classroom are graded tests, portfolio projects, book reports, final exam, and etc. Our teachers can also use these results to evaluate how successful their teaching methods were and see if they need to be adjusted next time they teach that unit. Okay, those are three lenses in assessment in learning English. The first one is assessment for learning, next is assessment as learning, and the third and last one is assessment of learning. Next is what is assessed. Now, let's talk about the areas of K-12 curriculum. There are 4 areas to assess students under the said curriculum, which is content standard, performance standard, learning competencies, and concept development. When we say content standards, these are the essential understanding that the learners must be able to demonstrate in relation to the content. Okay, content standard describes the specific content that should be taught and learned. It also articulates core knowledge and skills that students should master. It is a guide for teachers in identifying instructions on the knowledge and skills that students should learn. In content standard, this answers the question, what should students know and do? For example, the learner demonstrates understanding of how American literature and other text types serve as means of enhancing the self. The next is the performance standard. These are the abilities and skills that learners must be able to demonstrate in relation to the content. Okay, here in performance standard, it defines level of work that demonstrates achievement of standard. It provides clear expectation for instruction, assessment, and student at work. It helps teacher assess the extent to which the student have acquired the knowledge and applied the skills learned. In performance standard, this answer the question, how well must students ask their work? Example of performance standard is the learner actively participate in a speech choir through using effective verbal and non-verbal strategies. The next is the learning competencies. These are knowledge, skills, and attitudes that learners have to demonstrate in every lesson or activity. Here in learning competencies, these are the main ideas or skills you expect students to master. These are also called goals. A learning competencies can only be achieved when an individual demonstrates the ability to perform a specific task in a specific setting. Students use and develop their learning competencies when they encounter unfamiliar or challenging situations. And also, learning competencies help students draw and build upon what they know, how they think, and what they can do. The last one is concept development. This is the measure of how the learners are able to progress in the attainment of the standards. Concept development, meaning to say, are the big idea or the generalization contained in the learning objective. Concept development is important because it forced the teacher to have a very clear understanding and definition of what is being taught, and it provides a written reference for students. In addition, concept development is important so students can generalize new situations in school and real life. And also, students need a good foundation at the conceptual level so they can apply the concepts they have learned to new situations. For example, teach the rule that days of the week are always capitalized. This is a general rule that students can apply to any day of the week instead of individual days being taught separately. Again, the 4 areas to assess students under K-12 curriculum, which is the content standards, performance standards, learning competencies, and concept development. Again, I am Darlene E. Pascual, your reporter. I hope you learned something new today. Thanks for watching!